Thanks, everybody, and sorry for that delay. I'm really excited to bring you guys together for this next part of the Making Urbanism Anti-Racist series. YIMBY Action is a network of pro-housing activists fighting for more inclusive housing policies. We're driving policy change to promote the creation of more housing at all levels of government, cities, state, and federal. My name's Adam. I'm the Adam Estroff. I'm one of the leads for YIMBY Denver. And I'm really excited to bring Albus Brooks, former Denver City Council president and current vice president of strategy and business development at Milender White, to talk with us about anti-racism today. These conversations were launched as an exercise to take the message of recent uprisings. Our hope is that we can elevate ideas and practices that will help us reimagine how we shape cities and to whose benefit we create that change. We hope this series can help us explore the concept of anti-racism in urbanism. How can the policies of urbanism become a force that tears down institutional racism and reduces the racial wealth gap? And how does the urbanist movement address its own history and current participation in upholding white supremacy? So we're obviously not going to answer all of these questions today, but we're really, really hoping to get down this path. And so again, I'm really excited to start with Albus here. And Albus, do you want to just kind of kick us off with a little introduction to yourself and, what sort of brought you into civic activism, through nonprofits and elected office?
Yeah. YIMBYs, what's up? Albus Brooks, nice to really meet you guys virtually. I'm just be honest, I hate this. I'm a raging extrovert, so I'm slowly dying inside from 5 months of meetings virtually, but I'm grateful for the platform and able to do it. And I just want to thank every one of you all who have been engaged civically and publicly and who've showed up to meetings. And I can think of countless amounts of, the bond, which I think was a real shift for our city because of the number of individuals who spoke so intelligently and eloquently around multimodal opportunities in our city. And so thank you guys for doing that. But I came to Denver. I'm originally from Southern California, came to Denver in 1997, went to the University of Colorado, graduated in about 2000 and was super excited to just dive into the city, but from a perspective of young people who were being marginalized in our system, specifically African-American young people. And so I was with an organization called Young Life, which is a faith organization. I also started an organization called Issachar Center for Urban Leadership, which basically what it was a organization that invested in first generation Black and brown kids of color in our city. So any school that they could get into in the Denver metro area, we would pay a full ride scholarship. And we bought a building and they all lived in community, and it was all about urban leadership. And so that was really my entree into the city of Denver and politics and the realities and understanding that these kids that lived in certain zip codes were at the bottom of the social determinant ring of everything, economics, education, health, all of these social determinants they're on the bottom of. And I thought it was ridiculous that because they lived in a certain zip code, they had less opportunity to graduate on time, to live to their past 50, to be successful as individuals. And so I got excited to start being a part of city government to change how we do that. I believe in Denver that every kid should have the opportunity, no matter where they grew up, to live a well-nourished, healthy, and successful life. And so I got involved in about 2010.
And then before we, kind of go into your election and your time on city council, just kind of break this out a little bit more generally, what does anti-racism mean to you, kind of generally, and then also particularly when it comes to, urbanism and housing advocacy like we're doing here?
Yeah, so I'll just say this, that if you are thinking about anti-racism for the first time because of George Floyd, I mean, that should be a real indicator of how racism grows in America. And it's not by the KKK. It's not by these crazy white nationalists. It's by silent and ignorant people. And so I think it's important that we become aware, that we wake up. You hear it called in the urban culture, the woke consciousness. I think that's incredibly important. And so my whole life has been devoted to individuals who have been marginalized and individuals who didn't have actually the same opportunity that I did, that grew up with two incredible parents. And so anti-racism in my mind is, I take it on a scale of, we talk about diversity, we talk about inclusion, and then we talk about justice. Diversity is, hey man, we got a black dude. We got a black dude as a part of our organization. Yes, we doing it. Inclusion is shared values. That's a great step, right? As a policy, we are sharing values and we are open to our community. We want our organization to look like the community we serve. And then justice, to me, is anti-racism, right? Is anti-racist. Justice says an injustice has happened, so we must take a strategic focus and direction radically in this direction for justice, which is repaying what has been taken away. And then it's a hard place to step into, and it's going against the current, but it's really powerful. And I think later in this conversation, we're going to talk about what I feel like my work is in the justice realm, especially as it pertains to Black wealth in the 5 Points area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just, again, kind of before we get into the exciting city council part, are there any organizations in Denver that you feel have done, a particularly good job of, moving beyond diversity into, these shared values of inclusion and, moving towards justice? And I say that because, candidly, YIMBY Denver and the YIMBY movement as a whole, it attracts a lot of white people. And I think we have a long way to go to sort of move up that ladder you just described.
Whew, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of folks are doing well. I think, but the one that comes to my mind immediately, just because they do such great work from Programmatic Direct, in my faith background, I call direct ministry, but direct services to the community is Servicios de la Raza. Mm-hmm. And Rudy Gonzalez, in my mind, and his organization is the first thing that comes to mind as a group that is working towards anti-racism and working towards building pride for the La Raza in his community. And I've seen it time and time again. And I think that is a great organization who has represented Northwest, West Denver, far Northeast, East Side. They actually grew up down the street for me over here in Northeast Denver. And so that's a great organization.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about Albus running for city council. Just for those of you who aren't from Denver, one factor of Denver geography we talk a lot about is the inverted L. And so that's our two highways, I-70 it goes east-west, and I-25 goes north and south. And on the outside of that L, it's more diverse. There's less tree cover. There's more pollution, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of the endless impacts we see from systemic racism. And then on the inside, it's, the white side of the red line and, the wealthier communities. Albus, your district contained, 5 Points and a lot of North Denver, as well as, the booming downtown and New Union Station. And so I was just wondering if you could kind of start by describing your district a little bit, your experiences with it, and, talk about being a young candidate running for office.
Yeah. So, I think I got excited when I started Issachar Center for Urban Leadership, when a bunch of us got a chance to start it and get excited about it, and helping young people really get an education and start being gainfully employed and seeking these opportunities. But we also saw this ceiling that was provided, this artificial ceiling, and I call it the ceiling of opportunities in cities. and we can go into that. If you don't know how cities are designed, they are systemically racist ways that we've designed our cities, from redlining, the way that we invest in our cities. We have segregated our cities from a federal perspective since the 50s. And so I was seeing the outpouring of that working with kids. And so I wanted to do something about it and got in the office, knocked on maybe 10,000 doors, and, unknown candidate, youngest candidate to ever run. And we ended up winning by 2,000 votes and ran against 38 other people, the most in Denver municipal history. And I want to say, I give credit to, but I will say these young people who knocked doors with me, because that's all I knew who to knock with. Some of them were ex-gang members, and they go knock on a door, like in Park Hill. In Park Hill, just to let you know, it's a segregated community. If you are anywhere on a certain side of MLK, let's just say south of MLK, is particularly white. Did not always used to be that way, but particularly white. And your other side is north is African-American. Well, this African-American gentleman, ex-gang member, was knocking on doors. He's about 6'5", knocking on the door saying, "Hey, this guy changed my life. He's going to change the city. Vote for him." And the stay-at-home moms were like, "Okay, yeah, we're going to vote for him. Just get off the." So it was it was a different type of election. It was actual people who were a part of the community that we raised up. And so, but the thing that I loved about District 8 at the time is the most diverse district in the city, most eclectic district. I had constituents from billionaires on down to those living in poverty, to those living on the street, Black, white, Latino. It was incredible. And that excitement in my young, energetic, excited way, just to kind of bring folks together. And, we ran on this deal called Connecting Diverse Communities. And what good is diversity if it's disconnected, right? And so that was kind of our rallying cry in 2011. But what I didn't understand was how hard it would be to bring people together, and that folks would come after me, like angrily. And we're going to talk about this. You mentioned this a couple of times. I'm like, man, why do people come at you so hard? Like I've done something, right? I felt like we were tapping into the brokenness of humanity, right? That humanity wants to have a scapegoat. They want to have a developer to be pissed at, a Black person to be pissed at, right? The white soccer mom to be pissed at. And what we tried to do was really bring folks together and say, actually, they have a perspective. How do we come together and be together as a community? And I think that enraged a lot of people. And so that was our district, and that is our district. And I love it. And I think it's beautiful. And that's the invitation that we have as human, to live with people who are different. They think different than us. Who wants to be in a silo, right? And so that's what we kept pushing towards. And I think we did some incredible stuff. And I think we pissed off some people. And for those folks who aren't in Denver, I got voted out of office because I really believe that we hit that nerve in some ways. And that's okay. That's a part of democracy. But it was a fascinating study of how to bring people together the best way that you can and try and get things done.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to add, for the audience, feel free to drop any questions you have for Albus in the Q&A feature or the chat. And, Gosha and Dimitri will be picking out a couple questions for us to ask to Albus, in the end. So just feel free to toss those in. But, so after you were elected in 2011, kind of on the heels of the Great Recession. And then, what kicks off is, I think it's the second or third most intensive period of population growth in the history of Denver. And your district, being on the Black side of the red line, was not single unit zoned and faced a lot of development. There was a lot of displacement. And, what was your experience kind of managing and representing this district during this period of intensive change?
Yeah, well, even before that, 2010 was the end of the census count, right? And so we had the numbers, and the numbers did show that 80205, the district I represented, was the top 10 most gentrified zip codes in the United States of America. And that's hard for Denver to hear. What? 80205, how is it not the Highlands? How is it not? But the way that it was measured in the census was a larger median income, a larger income than the median income that was set currently in 2000 for that district. And so I walked into a district that was already rapidly gentrifying. That was tough. How do we bring folks together? And so we started meeting with Black property owners and individuals. And one of the first things we heard, especially from the Black property owners, was, how come we don't have the same tools that those 10 blocks from us downtown have, like tax increment financing, like some of these other issues? And so one of the first deals that we passed on Welton was tax increment financing, which became one of the first angry, upset things the community came back at me at, because they thought, you know, I was trying to blight the area. And it was like, oh, actually, these are property owners who've owned property for 40 years who wanted to see these uses so that they could improve their property. So it was the misunderstanding, right? Who are you for? Well, I'm for the community, but you know, I have to represent. And we live in a direct democracy, right? Like, you work for me, Joe, whoever, right? And I was always like, no, I work for you, and all of you disagree. So I have to take that and really synthesize that data and information and say, okay, how does this best represent the folks as a whole? And so it was very challenging, but I believe, and you know, we'll talk about it in a little bit, but I believe we're starting to see some incredible strides. In the last year and a half, there's over 9 parcels that have been bought by African Americans on Welton. Welton, in the historic 5 Points, you're gonna be seeing some of the most development happen and all these things, but it's happening because of Black owners who came together and began to invest in their property. And it's a powerful story. You cannot see this concentration of African Americans investing in their own property and developing anywhere in the city, right? And if you say the city, you might as well say the metro area, right? And so it's a powerful story, but it doesn't mean it wasn't hard. Very difficult.
Yeah, you know, so talking about how, you know, property owners in 5 Points, you know, it was called Harlem of the West in the past. I mean, this was a really affluent African-American community. And even the redlining documents are like, oh, well, it's really nice for a Black neighborhood. I mean, so this is a really, really fine urban stock going back a long time. And you talked about the barriers folks had to accessing. There's the Rossonian right there. Great picture. And so you talk about how, you know, tax increment financing and, you know, other policies weren't available for folks to build wealth or, you know, protect their communities. What kind of barriers did you run into on council for passing, you know, housing equity policies?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're stepping into a lot right there. And, you know, all I got to say, this is the Rossonian behind me. This is the place where, you know, I like to bring it up because what African Americans did in the face of redlining, in the face of being denied by banks where they couldn't invest in property, Lena Horne, you know, Dizzy Gillespie, you know, all of these incredible jazz artists in the 30s, 40s, and 50s that played downtown did not have a place to stay because you couldn't stay downtown. They had to come here, and they stay at the Rossonian, and we've got a plan to revive the Rossonian here coming up. But one of the things, and this is the thing I'm most proud of right here, because this is about legacy. This is about anti-racism. This is about bringing, right, our legacy back. But I think from a macro perspective, to answer your question, Adam, when you go to the community and talk about housing needs and growth and incentive zoning and increased property and all this kind of stuff, it does not, to the community who wants more affordable housing, it doesn't make sense, right? it's not computing, because it's like, wait, all I know, and it makes sense. All I know is when I see new construction, it's for white, wealthy individuals. It's not for us. And so that was the constant pushback, is that growth means hurt, means gentrification, and takes away from the community. And they are 100, all the folks in the community are 100%, I support that because of what they've experienced for 50 years. What I was saying is that it was a new day, and that we could experience growth, housing opportunities that benefit the community first, that have displacement policies set up by the city in our affordable housing. So millennials aren't getting that first, displaced residents are, right? And so those were some of the things that we were pushing. But in this populist political climate, if I was talking to a developer about opportunities to do inclusion of affordable housing or things like that, that was seen as he's in the pocket of developers, this and that. We can't trust him. I'd rather have nothing than you negotiating with these individuals. And so it was a very toxic and barrier-driven environment, but we tried to navigate the best we could. And I'm proud of the 1,000 people a year that we got off the streets in the very level of housing for homelessness, right? I'm proud of the Affordable Housing Fund, first of its kind, largest in the state, that we passed in the city. Is it enough? No. Can the current council increase it? Yes, right? Like, there's all of these things that is just incredible, but we got a chance to just start it. That's our lot, right? Like, let's just start this stuff and get it in the system, and people can increase on it as time goes by.
Yeah, and one thing I'm gonna have to ask you about, because this was an audience requested question. So in Denver a few years ago, there was a proposal to widen the I-70 highway through the middle of the city, and this expansion was really contentious. And just full disclaimer, at the time, I didn't understand the issues and the history of racism behind it, and I didn't understand why people were so adamant about wanting it moved. Now, that I've been participating in housing activism, that was one of the things that kind of pushed me down this path and learned so much more. We can see that the highway system is part of a legacy of racism, and you are criticized by some of your constituents, and the Councilwoman Sitabaku ran against you about not being more vocal on opposing that highway. And I was just wondering if you could kind of talk about your experience with that. What policy levers did you actually have? What was going on? And if you would do it kind of differently looking back.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. In this job and in everything that we go through, you have to synthesize and analyze haters and critics, right? And so the hating, I don't care anything about. The critique is actually valid, right? Because there's a lot of racism that has happened because of our highway system. But I think in that critique, you got to start peeling back the layers of, well, what do you control? How do you control it? Whose project was it? And let's just talk about that. So this was a CDOT funded project, right? So the city did not control it. What levers did the city have? Actually, this wasn't in my district when it first came in. And when I heard about it and people talking about the reroute, I asked CDOT, look at the reroute, tell me the challenges for the reroute. When we discussed it, there are many different challenges, but the one that we couldn't get past, and even Councilwoman Robin Kinich and I went round and round on this, trying to figure out a way around it. But if you do not, the whole issue for folks, just to bring it in, was this was going to be funded by bridge replacement funds. And the bridge that they were replacing, was the overlay, right? It was the highway that was literally breaking down. And if you didn't replace that bridge, you don't get the $800,000, which was 80% of the project. and the reroute would not replace the bridge. And so you had to find the funding from the city, which you wasn't going to get, and from the state, which is already broke. And so that was the challenge in the fight. So that's one layer. The other layer is now, since I can't challenge the fight, and I know the leverage that I have as a city council person, that I'm not going to take down a widening project by CDOT that's literally 12 years down the road. What other levers do I have? And the last lever that I had was mitigation. And so to that point, the largest, I think, mitigation project was around $12 million. And we got, working with council at the time, working with Ortega, working with many council members, we found and identified $35 million for that community in particular to mitigate the impact of that I-70. I'm 10 blocks away from it. Is I-70 something I'm excited about? No. Said it many times. What do you do as a leader? You didn't plan it. You were given a shit sandwich and you've got to just deal with it. Do you lawsuit it all the way down? No, because in lawsuiting all the way down, I'm missing opportunities to provide mitigation for my community. And so leaders choose what they would do. What I would do different, which I think is a really good question, is I don't feel like we heard from individual residents. We didn't hear from the community of Global Elyria Swansea. We did not. We heard from individual residents. We largely heard from many white folks all over the city who were speaking for residents, which in my mind is not the way you want to have things. And if we could do it differently, there would just be much more engagement, even though the neighborhoods were overprescribed at the time, much more engagement and much more way that we could hear what the neighborhood really wanted to fight for as a community. Because I tell you, I walked that neighborhood, the entire neighborhood, Global Elyria Swansea, 4 to 5 times. And to say that there was a consensus in that neighborhood would be a flat out lie, right? There was no consensus, and that was part of the struggle. But yeah, not an easy one. One of the toughest deals that we dealt with on city council. But you got to look for the best opportunity in a really horrible situation.
Yeah, and I have a few more just before we go to audience questions. But and what we've been talking about has kind of brought up 2 things really come to mind. The Park Hill Golf Course, which is this 155-acre plot of land, and it has a legal document on it, a conservation easement that mandates it be used as a golf course forever. And there's some talk in the city about removing that easement, but of course, it's in one of the last, majority Black areas of town, and there's enormous fears about displacement. What are ways like a group like YIMBY can engage in elevating the voices of community and helping voices of community be heard? And, the other part that's kind of related to me in my mind when I think about this is, at the recent group living planning board hearing, this is to increase Denver's occupancy cap from 2 to 5 people in a house. There were a number of residents of Montbello who came and they talked about all of the things they don't get in their neighborhood. And so, kind of how do we communicate and also be better listeners? I know that's kind of a lot to pack out at once, but.
That is a lot to pack out. And I'm going to start from here is that actually in antiracism is taking many steps back, right? It's not taking steps forward, right? And I think we immediately want to walk into our action plan and do this. You guys are calling YIMBY action. So if you're not doing action, like what you're doing, it's really taking steps back. And I'm advising businesses to do this, organizations, as we really try to peel back the layers. And I would take a step back and say, what does the Black community in Denver, what do they need right now, right? And you don't do that just by thinking about it. You go and meet with the community and say, what can we advocate with you, behind you, underneath you, right? Like, we want to fight with you. Like, what can we be advocating? So that's one. Like, same for the Latinx community, right? That's the question you need to be asking. I think that's a first step. I think when it comes to Park Hill Golf Course, divisions actually might be aligned, because there are a lot of people in the Park Hill neighborhood who are, especially Northeast Park Hill, who are very serious about this issue. And I think that they've got to be out front. You don't have to be out front. You don't need to be out front. They've got to be out front. And you have to be reaching out to them right now and figuring out not just who the leaders are, but the coaches, but the pastors, right? The barbershops, all of it's unlearning what we've known as R&O outreach, community outreach, all that kind of stuff, and saying, how does this community, what are the assets in this community, and how do I align with them? So I think those are just a couple starting places.
Cool. And then, I definitely don't want to lose you without talking about the current council. We, of course, population growth hasn't abated. There was recent news that Palantir, a big Silicon Valley company with 2,500 highly paid employees, is relocating to Denver. And we also have the COVID crisis. So, what have you kind of seen on council, and what would be your notes to them on what they could do?
Yep. And Adam, by the way, we're going to get 10 more minutes. The 750 time does not, we don't need to do it. It's
for sure.
Okay. So current council, I would just say, I try not to be one of those folks who, once they leave, kind of watching every night and armchair quarterbacking. But I think the thing that that really makes me sad is that there are a lot of folks who are in office who feel like the people who were upset put them in office, but they're not accomplishing tangible benefits for the community, substantive benefits, 10, 20 years, transformational benefits for the community. They're populist benefits. They're great talking points. Really makes you feel like a fighter. But if you're done and gone, and you can't point to units that single mothers can now be in, if you can't point to units that homeless youth and families can now be in, if you can't point to policies, corruption that you stopped, what is it for? And I think at the end of the day, it hurts me, because the community who thinks that because they have a populist candidate is going to accomplish these things. And so to me, I will always support, whether I agree with someone politically or not, substantive issues getting done. One of my favorite folks on council, I got a lot of, listen, everybody on council is doing their hardest. I will say that. But I love watching Robin Kinich and the work that she's doing time in, week out, of really trying to change the dial in the conversation, and the complexion, for that point, of where we are as a city. And so those would be my 2 points.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're of course big Robin Kinich fans here as well, and we'll try and bring her in for a different event. But I think for a good audience question, just to kind of close you up before you have to pick up your daughter. This is from Ernest.
I don't have to. No.
Oh no, you're good. Never mind. You said the other thing. Okay, cool. Well, we've got a good question in from Ernest Brown. How do you navigate the tensions of this expansive vision of the populist moment we're living through, with the need to deliver tangible solutions to Black people today, with those tools that you have, with, that municipal leaders have? And this would be, advice to other people who I think are going to be running for office, or, moving into these leadership positions.
Yeah, I love to look back on where did I, what could I have done better, right? Where did I lose kind of my way and things like that, and to offering for folks who are now running. And I think I never lost a substantive kind of work, but what I lost when I first ran for office, and some of you guys who are on this call did this with me, and man, I ran every neighborhood. I'd do every Saturday morning, I'd run a mile, and we run a mile around the neighborhood, and we'd have substantive conversation about how people were experiencing their neighborhood. There was this connection there was this, this just realness, authenticity. And I think that's what people want more than anything, right? At the end of the day, if you get out there and you don't do anything, which I highly, highly discourage, don't go in office if you don't want to do anything. But if you don't do anything, but you make a huge connection in your community of listening and being present, that's what voters really and constituents really, really want. And the excellent piece is listening, having empathy, understanding, and actually doing something, and having pretty substantial change in the city.
Yeah, and we have another audience question as well. Talking about how Denver from 2007 to 2017 was one of the only metro region in the country that had improving prosperity, but we also still are the second worst city for gentrification. So how can we make sure that those benefits are spread more evenly? Do you have any kind of policy ideas or sort of tonal ideas for how we can shift as a city?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a real challenge. And I think what's also a challenge is that as you look at Denver, gentrification, let's just be very clear. The gentrification that's happening and has happened for the last 30 years has all been planned, right? And has been a part of our land use policy. And I believe that you aggressively address that policy in the city. You aggressively address, especially for people of color, is anti-displacement and first right of refusal for affordable properties. Those tools, which has now been granted by many cities. I'm not even aware if we have finally been granted. I know we put in the application to HUD before I left office. I'm assuming we have, but any affordable property, the first right of refusal should be given to displaced residents. I think you can get more aggressive. We started the incentive zoning program. It sounds like it's taken iterations. At 38th and Blake, it was tough because we didn't really, it's very, very complicated, but we need to recalibrate that system so we can get more affordable housing, first right of refusal for displaced residents, for commercial buildings, we get community service businesses. We can even get more hardcore and say, which I agree with, Black and brown businesses, entrepreneurship, incubators, in conjunction with OED. So I think those are some of the policies that we're really starting to see nationwide that are they working? Gosh, it takes 10 years, right? And so that's the other thing, is that a real honest conversation of saying, hey, community, come into the policy chamber with us. Let's figure this out. This isn't going to change tomorrow. It took 50 years for it to get like this. It's going to take us another 10 to 20 to see substantial changes. And so I think that's the hard piece of it. It takes time.
Great. So, I do want to go into your private sector experience as well, but I want to go back to something that we talked about a little earlier, which is, there are some political factions that, blame Albus for literally everything that happened in the city. It's kind of amazing for those of you who aren't from Denver to see, the way I jokingly describe it is it's like they think he spent his weekends driving to San Francisco and driving back with a van full of white people and dropping them into 5 points. So it's very deep, and I just kind of want you to speak to that experience of sort of being, both a scapegoat and considered to have, all of this power. You were city council president, so, but you solely represented one district.
Yeah, man, I've actually had some reflection on that question. And I think it is one of the most amazing compliments people have ever given me, to be quite honest, right? Because it's like, we expect so much more from you. Because if you think about it, the individuals who actually are coming up, I have a relationship with, all of them. I'm not going to name them all because it'd just be giving folks just too much. but I've had a relationship with all of the individuals, including our current city council person. And I think the hopes, the desires that were in that friendship, in that leadership position, I think somehow folks just really felt let down. Now, to folks who haven't met me, things like that, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is that we present. But I mean, the work that we've done around, you know, you talked about the gentrification. I mean, someone literally put my face on a Rhino Gentrification thing. And the work that we have done around, man, the Crips and the Bloods and the cheeky 30s and all of the gangs in this community to get jobs and get opportunities and entrepreneurship. And it is outrageous. And by the way, none of these folks, anyway, so it's outrageous. And I feel, you know, I don't know, feel really horrible around that stuff. And it's sad to see. But my hope is that level of intensity folks would give to the current folks who are elected. Give that intensity, that level, because what it did for me was to make sure it helped the policy. I mean, City Park Golf Course just opened. I have more scars from that one drainage project at City Park Golf Course than anything else. And it really helped because the design ended up being amazing. And I really encourage it. Hope is up on September 1st. Everybody check it out. It's gorgeous. You don't have to golf. Just go and sit in the clubhouse and you'll see. But it's just incredible the amount of scrutiny that was there. But it caused me, and I think caused other leaders to sharpen their pencil and be, hey, let's be the best that we can be. You know, the best leader we can be in this deal. So I don't have a good answer for you, but just some perspective.
Yeah, and so, you know, since you've been in city council, you're now, you know, working at Milender White, and this is one of the things that I think is just so, you know, impressive about your experience is, you know, you've done the nonprofit stuff, you've done the city stuff, and now you're doing, you know, the development work, and you know, so I guess what have you seen kind of moving into the private sector, working in both California and Colorado, and you know, what would you say to, you know, if there are any developers on the call, you know, how to bring anti-racism into their sort of projects and businesses?
Well, I would say that it's probably, and this is why, you know, once I got in, I went hard, man. Nationally speaking, working with other developers, is probably one of the most racist sectors. Like hands down. It's much whiter than it's much whiter than I thought. I knew it was white, but damn. And it's a real good old boy system. And so there's just a lot of breaking down that needs to happen. And I think, you know, my encouragement for developers on the phone and folks like that is like, even when you feel right, listen first, you know, seek first to listen and understand. Than to be understood is really my biggest encouragement there. And I'm just learning a ton. I think from a public sector guy, you know, for my city council and people running for city council, you really do not have as much power as you think you do. You know, like it's just, that was a huge awareness to me. I thought I was doing so much, you know, for District 9, but I wasn't. And so, you know, it's a great perspective that you get. And I think in the private sector, there's a lot that you can accomplish. We just signed a deal on Skid Row in Los Angeles with Mayor Garcetti on a permanent supportive women housing deal for about 150 units. And it's like, man, it's powerful, the work that we get to continue doing here in Denver, working with DHA and working with Boulder Housing Authority, you know, and so there's a lot of just great opportunity. But at the same time, you know, we do luxury products. We just finished the Pullman, right? It's the last parcel in Union Station. And people are like, why in the world would you do luxury? And this is just my philosophy on supply and demand, is that I think you've got to understand the entire spectrum of housing to really to meet the needs of a city. And so just some thoughts there.
Yeah, so I guess, we can just kind of close out. And if you're in the audience, we definitely have some slots open for some more questions. So feel free to drop those in. But I guess kind of just, looking forward, what are your hopes for the residential infill project that we're starting off here in Denver?
I'm bullish. And this is probably why I'm not in office anymore, because I really love what Minneapolis did kind of with their zoning, and eliminating kind of single family zoning and upzoning there. And I wish, if we can't do it citywide, that there would be certain parts of our city. I mean, my district was definitely, I heard from a lot of neighborhood folks that this is something that they had an appetite for and continue starting. And so I would say that it would be interesting to me to begin to offer this idea up in sections of the city, that where the community would be open to it, to see how it goes, see what the reaction is. That's how you begin to get a little taste for it. And so a rezoning like that could really, I think jumpstart some of our infill development opportunities.
Cool. Yeah, and we have another question in from the audience. And this kind of goes back to what I brought up with the folks coming from Montbello who were, talking about, overcrowding in their community, which, you don't need a law. Overcrowding is something people do when they're economically desperate. How do you bring people, especially people of color, into, this nuance of what you're describing? It sounds like that, as Ernest says, appreciating that nuance sounds like the key to converting the energy people have into the solutions that we need.
Yeah. Man, Ernest, one of the most powerful things, and it's what I get criticized a lot for actually, but one of the most powerful moments for me was in the height of all the drainage conversation. We brought forward the incentive zoning package, which you can imagine the Cole neighborhood, Curtis Park, all these folks were pissed. But one of the things we did was we sat developers, community people, architects at all the tables in the planning room. And they just began to have conversations. And what we made everyone do is ask the other sector or individual questions. You couldn't tell anybody what, you just had to ask questions. And so the neighbors had to say, how do you make a project pencil? The developers had to say, what makes your community livable? Man, we just started to see so much synergy in that room. And all of a sudden, what we heard was, okay, we'll let you go up 5 stories if we get this percentage of affordability and these kind of community serving businesses. And you just started to see the natural human progression of understanding, hearing first, understanding, speaking second, all that kind of stuff. And people begin to understand each other like, oh, okay, so you're not the devil, okay? You're not a socialist. Well, maybe you are, but you're reasonable, And it was just a beautiful conversation. And I think that's why we got so much support behind that initiative. But I think people need to be educated because it's, for us who we're in this world, we get it. It's intuitive, but it's counterintuitive to the public who don't live this every single day.
Sure. Well, I guess, just to close this out, are there any books or movies or pieces of content you've read or consumed recently that, you think YIMBY should check out?
Yeah, every YIMBY who's doing, who's kind of focused on land, land policy and things like that, should be reading The Color of Law. I'm reading it for the 4th time. We've got to really understand the urgency behind kind of anti-racism and anti-racist land policy. We have to understand it like a blueprint, like our Bible. We know it in the back of our hand because I think we've talked enough. Implementation of new policies is now where we need to be. And so I think it's incredibly important.
Yeah, and then do you have just, you know, kind of any last bits of wisdom you want to leave with us?
Yeah, I think, like I said before, you guys don't know. You don't know this, and I was sucking wind my last year in office. But some of my most incredible times was seeing you all eloquently state your position with people cussing and screaming at you. And I felt good because it wasn't just me, right? Like I was like, oh God, thank you. There's another group that is putting together cogent, you know, theories and ideas that will really help our city, and they're not crazy, right? And so keep up the fight. I'm a constituent. I'm in your city. Please call on me anytime I can be helpful. I might lose the fight for you, so keep that in mind. But keep up the fight. I mean, seriously, that 2017 bond initiative deal was probably one of the more impressive. I was chairing it at the time, and it was probably one of the most impressive testimonies that I heard at the time was given by YIMBY folks. So good work.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. And, you know, I really want to thank everybody for coming and listening to Albus. You know, YIMBY Denver is really excited to bring, you know, Denver civic leaders to this conversation. And, you know, I'm hoping that we'll be back soon with another event. And thank you so much, Albus. And, you know, for those of you, if you're not already YIMBY Action members or supporters of YIMBY Denver, you can go to yimbyaction.org/join. And you can join our movement to help create communities where everyone can thrive. And you know, keep your eyes open. You'll get a recording of this conversation, and there'll also be a lot more in this series coming up. So thanks again so much for coming. If you want to donate to YIMBY Denver right now, you can go to actblue.com/YIMBY Denver. But we're joining in with the YIMBY Action affiliate network, so we're really excited about that moving forward as well. So keep your ears peeled for that. Last announcement, Denver people, group living is coming before City Council on October 12th. So, you know, stay tuned for more on that, and we'll be showing up in force. But thanks so much again, and that's all I've got for tonight.
Hey guys, thank you. Have a great night.
All right, thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.